Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Ron at SceneGrinder, and welcome to the early release phase. So what this basically means is we've gone through our beta, we have added a lot of features, got a lot of feedback on those features, and now we're opening it up to a wider audience. And during the early release, we will be continuing to add a lot more features, fixing some bugs. And so kind of a core thing to keep in mind when watching this video is SceneGrinder is rapidly changing. And so what you see on your screen may differ than what I show you on the video because something has changed since I cut the video. So let me go ahead and stop the video part and I'll start showing you SceneGrinder and back in just a second. Okay, so here's what you should see when you log in. On the top left, you've got worlds and campaigns. And below that, you've got My Characters. Now, My Characters is referring to characters that you have in other people's worlds. So this is not characters in your worlds. This is if you're a player in somebody else's world. So for today, let's focus on worlds and campaigns up here. And just a couple quick notes before I hit everything else. There's some menu options up here that are important. Tutorials is where this video and all of our other help videos are going to go. So it's definitely something you'll want to check out. Support, let me go ahead and click on that. This is where you can click here to search our knowledge base if you've got any questions. And if you don't find answers to what you're looking for, you can click create a ticket down here and send us an email. Also, if you don't see worlds and campaigns when you log in and you've got a GM account or you paid for a GM account, then absolutely send us a support ticket and we'll get that taken care of. And to the right of that is a link to your user profile page. And there's some slider options down here, which I'll cover in the future. But for right now, just one thing to know is this is where your SceneGrinder moniker is. And the moniker is how we refer to you in SceneGrinder. So the key thing is when you go to invite players to your world, what they're going to do is give you their moniker, and then you'll attach that to characters, and that's how you get people into your world. So just keep in mind that the moniker is very important. And okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the first world. So you can either click the big button here that's always visible, or you can click the Create My First World button that disappears after you create a world. So I'll start there. Both do the same thing, by the way. So here you can put in the name of your world. Let's call it My First World. And you can set an image for it. Let me go ahead and do that real quick, show you how that looks. You do have to click on the map, by the way, on the image to get the Use Image button to show. And you can put a description in for your world if you want to. And then the next thing you need to do is decide on a game system. So you can select one of the pre-existing ones that we've got out there or that community has put out there in the marketplace, or you can create one yourself. So for this demo, I'm just going to select a game system. Now, as you can see, the current list is very, very short. It has D&D 5e, and that's the only one on there right now. There will be a lot more game systems added very soon. If there's a particular game system that you're interested in, then send us a support ticket. It'd be great. Also, if you are interested in a game system, if you could work with us a bit on making sure we get the rules correct. But for right now, let's just go ahead and create a 5e world. All you do is you select it in the list and then click select. And then you get this message up top saying it's done. And so basically what's happened at this point is we have now linked the 5e rule set with your world. So I'm going to pop back just to the home page real quick and show you. So you can see that image that you set. This is how it'll show. All right, so I'm going back in there. And so the first thing you really want to do for your world is set up scenes. So for scenes, you've got two options. You can do import a scene or you can create a new one. So let me show you the import real quick. And by the way, this screen is definitely going to be changing pretty significantly in the coming weeks. This is where you can import scenes that either the SceneGrinder team has shared or the community has shared. And we just turned this feature on, so there's not many scenes out there right now, but expect to see dozens or hundreds of scenes before too long. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Cemetery in the Woods. And you see you get this message up here saying that that scene is importing. Now, importing the scene, depending on how large it is, might take a few minutes. It might even take up to like 10 minutes, just depends on how large and complex it is. But once you click that import, you can see it started the import process here, and you don't need to worry about it at that point. You can just come back in about 5 or 10 minutes and then click on the scene and get into it. So for right now, I'm just going to leave that alone, and I'm going to click on the add a location, add a scene. And so this is the scene name. I'm just going to call it House in the Woods. And then you got a couple options here. As the basis for the scene, the flat terrain on it, you can start with a scene map. So if you've got a cool scene that you found on the internet and you just want to start with that as the basis for your scene, you can do that. Or you can add a custom map. And that's what I'm going to go ahead and do today. And just let you know, the numbers you see here for max width and height, that's in pixels, and same with the grid size. So what this is saying is the scene by default is going to be 1024 by 1024 pixels with a grid size of 20. So it's a 20 by 20 square, and each square represents 5 feet. We do not put any restrictions on the size of your scenes, so you can make them as small or large as you want to. And for today's purposes, I'm just going to leave it with the defaults. All right, so when you do a custom scene, the default texture is just the green grass that you see here right now. So a couple things before I show you editing a scene. On the left-hand side are a bunch of buttons, and we'll cover those in other videos. We hit on a couple of them in just a few minutes, but these are basically your gameplay buttons to manage different things going on in the game. This thing over here on the left is what we call the avatar list. So this shows important characters. Like, for example, if there's an encounter, you have the players and the NPCs and monsters listed here. And you got some filter options there. Again, we'll cover all this in detail in other videos. For right now, I'm just going to click and hide that avatar list. And on the right-hand side, we've got things dealing with scenes. So I'm going to take the first one here is edit a scene. And there's a lot that you can do with the scene. By the way, there's 6 tabs you can see over here. So there's a ton of different customization options with scenes, and I will do other videos that go over those in detail. But to keep this video short, I'm just going to show adding a house. So I selected for house 04. I clicked the add it to the scene button, the choose model, and I click on the scene. And that's all you have to do to add a model to the house. Now, once you've got the model there, you can do things like resize the model, turn the angle on it, change the vertical height on it, all kinds of things. We'll cover that in other videos. But just know that all you have to do is search for the model or just kind of browse through all the models we've got in our database and choose the ones that you like. Now, dealing with models, there's also a second option called 3D brushes. And we've got one default one here. But the idea with a 3D brush is if you want to put down a whole bunch of models very quickly, like for example, I called this scene House in the Woods, you can use these 3D brushes. And give me just a second here, you'll see what's happening. What you do with a 3D brush is you link models to it, and then there's a whole bunch of different parameters that you can set. I'm just going to copy this to show you. All kinds of parameters you can set down here to randomize the models that are getting placed. And what this allows you to do is really quickly create scenes. So, for that time when the party comes out there, and instead of doing the town adventure that you were expecting, they want to go to the cabin in the woods. Well, now in just a few seconds, 30 seconds here, you can draw a quick cabin in the woods scene. So that's 3D brushes. Terrain. This is like most map programs that you're probably used to using right now. Everything we do with terrain is in layers. And so again, you start with your base grass, and then you can add other layers. And I'll just give you a quick demo on that. And it's House in the Woods, so I'll choose forest ground. And then I'll just start dragging it around. And of course, you can make the reticle larger or smaller, however you want to do it. And then when you are placing terrain, For each layer that you put down, you can set the scale, which is basically the zoom level on it, so you can get it however you want it to look, and the opacity as well. And then there's another type of opacity type thing that we've got called blend level, which is going to let you set a special blend level for whatever you're painting at the time. So for example, right here, you've got this kind of the hard edge between the grass and the forest grass. I can do a blend level, and you can see it's painting down the forest grass, but it's doing it at a very light level. And the more I go over an area, uh, the darker it paints whatever terrain I've got selected. So this is a great way to blend layers together so they look natural and don't have those hard edges. So again, there's a whole bunch you can do with terrain, but we'll get to more of it later. Elevation, it's pretty simple. You've got plateaus and slopes for elevation changes. Now I'll make this a little bit larger to show you how it works. Right now it's set to a plateau. So when you put an elevation change down, it's going to be a sheer drop off. And so if I zoom in here, you can see it's a sheer drop off from the top, 20 feet down to the bottom. There's also an undo feature. This is also there for terrain as well. If you don't like what you just did, just click undo, and there goes that hill. And then you can do, instead of a plateau, you can do a slope. And I'm just going to set this a little bit higher to make it more obvious. Okay, so you can see what's happening here is that hill's being created, but instead of that sheer drop off for the plateau, it's sloping down from the very top of the center to the very edge of where I had the reticle. And you can also add water as well. And just to show you that real quick, to add water, what you want to do is decrease the terrain height. And the way water currently works in SceneGrinder is when you put water on the scene, it's at the level you specify and below. So I set it at -1, so any terrain that's less than a foot below the ground will have water. Now later in early release, we're going to have the ability to put water on top of things, so you can put a mountain and have a lake on top of the mountain. But for right now, it's based on the water level for the scene. Walls, there's a ton of walls, and we'll cover that in another video, but just know that you can put walls down. You can also put walled structures down. So you can put down a square or a circle structure, and then when you do that, you can also give those structures roofs and ceilings, and so you can also build multi-story structures. And again, that's a little more complicated. We'll hit that in another video. And last thing is grid. So especially if you are dealing with a 2D map that you've pulled in off the internet, and maybe that map doesn't quite align with the normal default grid from SceneGrinder, you can see you can very easily move the grid around so everything lines up the way you want it to. So that's a really quick look at editing a scene. So I'm going to pause the video for just a second, and I'm going to flip over to that downloaded scene, and then I'll show you how to add characters and monsters to a scene. Okay, so this is that Cemetery in the Woods scene that I mentioned before, and you can see it has loaded and everything is there. By the way, just a note, when you're moving around a scene, the WASD keys will move you around the scene, and the E and the Q keys will spin the scene for you. So that's a quick way to get around. And every now and then when you do the W key, the screen's gonna go black because it's gonna shoot the camera below the surface of the scene. Just hit the S key, that will back you up, and that should fix it. That is on our list. We will get that fixed, but just wanted to let you know in case you run into that. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a character to the scene, or to my world actually. And that's one thing to note. Currently with SceneGrinder, when you add a character, you're adding it to the world and it has to be in the scene. Later on during early release, we'll break that out so you can add characters that are not actually in a scene yet, but for right now, they do need to be in a scene. So what you do is you hold down the Alt key and left click on the map, and that's going to give you this orange arrow right there. And then there's two options up here. There's create a new character and also summon a character. I'm just going to create a new character for right now. And then you're going to choose what type of character. Do you want it to be a monster, or do you want to be a character, which would be a player normally? So I'm just going to choose character, and there's other options here, which I'll get to in other videos, but for right now, I'm just going to click next. You can see, by the way, it's adding one character. If I wanted to add multiple characters at the same time, I can just bump this up as high as I want it to go. And then you've got a default name for the character. If these were NPCs, you could do generate names, and it would generate names based on what you've got selected there. And then all you do is click add to scene. And again, there's other things on the form that do some cool stuff, but we'll cover that in other videos. So I'm going to click add to scene. All right, I'm going to hit escape to get rid of that orange arrow. And so what we've got here is what we call our default character. So every time you add a character to a scene, this is the default that you're going to see. And what you do is you left click on it, and you can see that's going to make it your selected character. And then double click on it. And this opens up the character sheet. Now again, this is the 5e world, so this is the 5e character sheet. What you want to do is go to settings, and then there's assign player. So you click assign player, and then you get that moniker that I mentioned at the start of the video. You get that from the player, and you enter that here, and then click assign. And that's all you need to do. Now when the player goes into SceneGrinder, they will now see this as an option, and if they click on it, it will bring them to this scene with this character loaded. Okay, so now that we've got a party member there, let's go ahead and add some monsters to give them something to do. So I start with holding on the Alt key and left clicking on the map again, and then I'm going to go ahead and do create character. And this time I'm going to choose monster. I'm just going to put down 1 initially. And for since it's a monster and 5e includes a monster table in the SRD, we do include that in the integration. So I'm going to go down to, let's throw a skeleton in there. It is a graveyard, so there we go. And then I will click add to scene. Okay, and there you go. Now we have a skeleton on the scene. Okay, so that concludes all of the core things I wanted to talk about today. So just a quick reminder, this went through creating a world, importing a shared scene, creating a new scene, adding players to your world, and adding monsters and NPCs. And just a few last notes, I'm just going to kind of remind you about a few of the features we've talked about over the last couple of years. One, SceneGrinder does support the concept of turns and rounds. We do have lots of cool options for you to use for your scenes in addition to the scene editing itself. You can set light levels for scenes, sun position. You can turn rain and snow on in your scenes, have different strength for that. You can have fog of different colors, different densities. And of course, for light levels and fog, you can hide it from the GM so that you can see the scene clearly even if your players cannot. And you can have lightning and thunder on your scenes. Just kind of cool atmospheric things. And let me just show you the perspective from a player. Okay, so now I'm showing you the player view, and this is from our current campaign that we've got going on right now. So in this particular scene, we snuck into the base of a volcano, and so you can see there is lava down below, and there's a really, really thick sulfuric fog on the scene, which is really messing with our line of sight. Of course, the GM has fog turned off for them, but really kind of a cool setting to be in. And just to hit a couple things on the features, I mentioned the game system integration. So for example, if I want to do an attack, I'll just swing my sword. You can see that SceneGrinder is correctly defaulting a d20, my proficiency bonus, and my strength bonus when doing the attack roll. We do also have all the other types of dice and potential modifiers listed above it in case you need to do something special, so that's really easy. And if you want to or you need to, you can always just add an explicit number to a die roll. So anyway, the cool thing about that is as a player and also as a GM, I don't need to remember that a sword does a D8 damage, or that I need to include my proficiency or anything like that, SceneGrinder will do all that for me. So that's pretty much it. There's tons of other functionality that I want to talk to you about, but I think I'm hitting about 20 minutes right now, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. But looking forward to seeing what everybody does with SceneGrinder in the future. And that's it for this one. Happy gaming, everybody. Bye.